This week on The Wheelhouse. The fight for the 19th, a woman's right to vote, and Connecticut's part in this story.
Let mother vote, just hold your fury in. Maybe Carrie's right, and that's the only way we win. She sounds just like my father. Please, Alice, have some sense. Don't you know that no one likes a girl who's too intense? Don't get so defensive, Alice, don't be so aggressive. Settle down, you're too obsessive. I've heard it many times before, but I don't want to hear it anymore.
For Connecticut Public, I'm Frankie Graziano. This is The Wheelhouse, the show that connects politics to the people. We got your weekly dose of politics in Connecticut and beyond, right here, maybe a little theater as well. Suffs, the Tony Award-winning Broadway musical about powerful women, has come to Hartford. Theatergoers at the Bushnell will see history through the eyes of women who won the fight for the right to vote. This hour, we'll go back in time to see how Connecticut people fared during this time, during the suffragist movement, and learn about another place in the state where you can go to understand the history of women's suffrage. And before we get into Suffs, we're going to start right there with a little bit of the history aspect. Joining me now, the Public Programs Coordinator or Director at the Connecticut Museum of Culture and History, Natalie Belanger. Natalie, thank you so much for coming in here this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So great to talk to you. I want to talk about a little bit of history here in Connecticut, meet some of the people and places we need to know regarding the suffragist movement. I just want to talk about what we would see if we went to go see Suffs. We'd see the organization of the 1913 Women's Suffrage Procession. In the play, we see Ida B. Wells and Alice Paul argue over where Wells should march. She ends up rolling with her state, Illinois. Connecticut was actually at the march in 1913 in Washington, D.C. Do I have that right, Natalie?
Yes, you do. And we had our own march the following year.
And then at the Connecticut Museum of Culture and History, I understand it, there's a relic from this march.
Yeah, it's a really cool document. So we have a program from that day. So it's many pages. It's got really cool information about that particular day. So the march was put on, it was sponsored by the Connecticut Women's Suffrage Association, which was like the Connecticut branch of the national organization. And it was this parade with many different floats and contingencies that marched. And what's kind of interesting is that they're organized by profession. So you start off with one that is a group of women marching as professionals, doctors, lawyers, I want to say librarians, right, teachers. You have other segments of the parade where women are marching as artists and journalists. There's another one which is really interesting that is women marching as working class women. So there are women who are representing corset factory workers and hat factory workers and textile factory workers and even domestic workers, so like maids, housemaids, which is a really interesting sign of the way that by that time the suffrage movement was really making inroads in getting working class women on board, because in its earlier phases, it was much more of like a middle class movement.
Natalie's a pro herself because she's done the hard work already of talking about something that's going to be a specter in what we do the rest of the show, and really the history of women's suffrage in America. Class is a dynamic. Mm-hmm. What names are featured in this program? I know you talk about groups and something like that. Is there anybody that we may know throughout history or somebody we should know that's in this program?
So there is a name that's probably familiar to a lot of people, but it's not the person that most people might think it is. So the leader of the Connecticut Women's Suffrage Association at the time was Katharine Houghton Hepburn. You're like, oh, Katharine Hepburn, like the actress. This was her mom. And so Katharine Hepburn, this was a family, they lived right here in Hartford. Katharine Houghton Hepburn, the mom, had, I think, 3 kids at this point. Maybe she was on her 4th kid. And she was married to a urologist at Hartford Hospital, and she'd gotten into the suffrage movement when a British suffragist, Emmeline Pankhurst, came to speak in Hartford around 1910. I'm not exactly sure the date, but Pankhurst was one of the militant suffragists in England. She was one of the women who she'd gone to jail, she'd done hunger striking, and Hepburn was fired up by this. And so she rose to become the leader of the Connecticut Women's Suffrage Association. When she took that organization over, it had about 500 members. When she was done with it 8 years later, it had over 30,000. So she was like one heck of an organizer.
Katherine Houghton Hepburn,
Yeah.
her husband, you mentioned, a urologist. Does his profession or at least any of their interests have anything to do with their motivations as something that they might be pushing at the time, at least as one of their causes that they cared about?
Yeah, so they're both really interesting. The Hepburns were very eccentric people. Dr. Hepburn had an interest in venereal disease. So, people,
It's okay to talk about VD on the Wheelhouse.
It's okay. It's fine. STIs, as we'd say today. So people, would say, like, you'd go to dinner with the Hepburns, and Mrs. Hepburn would be going on about, suffragism, and her other pet cause was birth control, which was, of course, illegal at the time, right? So she'd be talking about that, and Dr. Hepburn would be talking about, like, how high rates of syphilis were in Hartford, and, like, they were just a really interesting, eccentric, unusual couple. And Katherine Houghton Hepburn, after women got the vote in 1920, she actually spent the rest of her life devoted to the cause of birth control. So she worked with Margaret Sanger, who she had known for a while, and they founded, I think, the American Birth Control League, which is the forerunner of Planned Parenthood.
Very important time in America. Of course, we're going to World War soon after. The World War starts in 1914. Around the time you have this Connecticut Women's March here, and then the war, we get into it 2 years later. But I just want to ask you at this point, what are attitudes towards women and gender? You talked about birth control. That's a huge issue, but I would imagine a lot of men don't have time for that at that point, and even women as well. Yeah,
it's an interesting time, really. I mean, people have written entire books about this. Women are making, even before women got the vote nationally, because, say in 1910, right, women could vote in some states, they could vote in some Western states. Here in Connecticut, they could vote for school boards as of like 1893. You could vote in school board elections if you're a woman. Women are making inroads in the professions. Women are graduating from high school in equal or maybe even larger numbers than girls than boys. They're educated, and they are, this is the progressive era. So there's all this reform going on in the early 1900s. People are working to clean up the food supply. End child labor is a huge one. Minimum wage laws. Lots of people are working for prohibition of alcohol. And the backbone of those movements is really women. And so women are very organized, and it's a really interesting thing to see. I think a lot of people assume that, at the time, before women had the vote, all women wanted the vote and all men didn't want women to vote. And that is absolutely not true. So lots of men supported women's suffrage and lots of women were opposed to it, but not always for the reasons you might think. So people, I think today might think that, women who didn't think women should vote believed in this very oppressive gender ideal where women should stay at home and never speak up and, be seen and not heard, or maybe not even seen. But the truth is, a lot of the women who were opposed to suffrage were quite accomplished women. Some of them were reformers, activists. All of them were active in their communities. And Connecticut had an official organization opposed to women's suffrage run by women who were really skilled at lobbying. And they did all the stuff the Suffs did, right? So they did pamphlets, and I don't know, they didn't really do rallies, but they were very politically astute. And we have some of their papers at the museum, too. It's really interesting to see how, they could list every representative in the General Assembly from every town and, what their position on suffrage was. So they're quite skilled political operatives, but they're working against women getting the vote in Connecticut.
It's sort of beneath them at that point.
I think for some of them, a lot of them really, truly believe, and this was sort of the zeitgeist at the time, right? So there's separate spheres. Women are very good at doing the things women are good at doing, okay? The home, children, things like nursing, right? So it makes sense to people that women are becoming nurses and teachers. That makes sense. It's care work. Men are good at the other stuff, like politics. And a lot of people believed that women, it was a waste of their talents to try to do the things men did. And a lot of others believed that politics was kind of inherently dirty. And why would women stoop to that? Women have the moral high ground. Women are more pure. Why would you get involved in disgusting politics when you could rise above it and like lobby your legislators to pass a minimum wage law or something like that?
You mentioned progress earlier. Yeah. Is there progress in Connecticut in terms of inclusivity in the Connecticut women's suffrage movement or not?
Yeah. So I said earlier, I kind of heaped some praise on them for making, for working, this middle class organization working with working class women. But there's a glaring, right, omission here. So that, if we go back to that pamphlet we have for that 1914 parade, I can't find anywhere in it. Doesn't appear to be any group of women of color marching as women of color. It's possible that some women of color marched like with their professions, but we don't know, or at least I don't know. And this Connecticut Women's Suffrage Association did not admit black women. So African American women, there were plenty of them who worked for suffrage in Connecticut, but they had their own organizations, and very often their suffrage work was so mixed up with other activism that they're doing. So one of the best known ones here in Hartford is Mary Townsend Seymour, who was a founder of the Greater Hartford NAACP. And that came about just around the same time that women, just at the last couple of years of the suffrage vote. She also worked to unionize women, especially tobacco workers, African-American tobacco workers in the towns in the Hartford area. And she's a person who is working on multiple causes at once, including suffrage. And she wrote letters to the national NAACP about the Connecticut situation, and in which she was quite critical of Katherine Houghton Hepburn for, she kind of said she's not really an ally.
There's primary documentation to say that as well.
Yeah.
In terms of primary documentation, you got my journalist spine tingling here. You talked about some pamphlets. You talked about the program. In totality, what do you have at the museum regarding women's suffrage, and where can we find you all?
So the Connecticut Museum is on Elizabeth Street in the west end of Hartford. Come visit us. Connecticut Museum of Culture and History is our full name. We have some documentation. We have files, letters of the Connecticut Association opposed to women's suffrage. So we have the antis. We have a lot of documentation related to them. We have some suffrage materials related to the CWSA. I will say nobody really has Katherine Houghton Hepburn's papers, or at least not many of them, because her husband had most of them destroyed after she passed away, which is unfortunate. Of course, the Connecticut State Library also has quite a bit associated with the Connecticut Women's Suffrage Association. You can find incredible photographs of suffrage activities on their website. Also, the Library of Congress has a lot. So there's a lot of information out there if people are interested.
Anytime we do something like this, we get inspired by Suffs coming to the Bushnell or something like that. You want to talk about Connecticut's role in this story. And Natalie, you did it all for us. Thank you so much. I appreciate your work. Natalie Belanger, Public Programs Manager for the Connecticut Museum of Culture and History. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
After this, we're going to talk to an actor in Suffs, and we're also going to talk to the creative producer of Suffs. More Wheelhouse is coming up right after this. You're listening to Connecticut Public. This is the Wheelhouse. I'm Frankie Graziano. Suffs coming to the Bushnell in Connecticut. We are excited to have some members of the show on our show. 888-720-9677, the number to call if you're interested in the Wheelhouse. You could also find us on social media. Very exciting here to hear from people associated with Suffs, the musical that inspired today's show about women's suffrage. Danyel Fulton portrays Ida B. Wells, the journalist. Danyel, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So great to have you here. I'm excited. And I'm excited to meet Rachel Sussman as well. Very instrumental in this. Obviously, Shayna Taub is the writer, but you've worked very closely with Shayna. You are the creative producer. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Frankie.
Tony Award-winning Rachel Sussman, as I understand it. That is fantastic. If Danyel doesn't have a Tony soon or doesn't already have one, then oof. All right.
I'm in good company.
That's right. Let me concentrate here. Let me focus up here and ask you a first question. Danyel, I view your performance as Ida B. Wells in the movement as a linchpin for this musical. Alice Paul, played by Connecticut's Maya Kelleher, actually, she's from Columbia, is the radical of the day that is running the effort we see in Suffs. You're there constantly reminding another powerful black woman, Mary Church Terrell, too, about the lack of inclusivity in the national women's suffrage movement. I imagine it's one thing to be powerful and then have to convey that to a big audience.
Oh, yeah.
How do you do that?
I don't know every day, but, I consider this a big responsibility and honor to be able to introduce Ida B. Wells to so many people, because so many people don't know her name. And if they do know her name, they don't know what she was about. I was one of those people who didn't know. I knew her name. I knew she wrote some things, but I had no idea she was an anti-lynching crusader. She was one of our first investigative journalists. So, powerful. Like, she was a powerful, powerful woman. And actually one of
How many lynchings must I cite?
How many lynchings must I cite? And I don't know if she'd be too happy about 2026 either. But, to introduce her is the power, to keep her name going. And at that time, she was one of the most famous women. There were poems written about her, and so much literature. People were just loved her so much, and then her name just didn't continue on. So Suffs just does her such honor. I'm just so grateful to be able to do so as well.
When I saw Suffs in Providence, you received several standing ovations for your scene-stealing singing, I will say.
Now what?
Is that any sort of... Yeah, I guess you didn't see it.
I can't see a thing.
Yeah. You were locked in. I was looking at you. I was like, is she noticing this?
It's pretty dark.
Is that any sort of validation?
Of course. You want to be careful about what validation you're taking in and not, because it ebbs and flows. This, as we both know, this business can consume you if you let it. But it is a validation that people are hearing and listening to what she's saying. People get fired up. They're ready. Like we said earlier, when Ida steps out, she's the first black face on stage. Like, we're all on stage at the beginning, but in silhouettes, they can't see us. So she's the first introduction of, okay, we're going to get a little deeper. We have to address this. So people are excited, to start that conversation, and they're fired up already. So by the time the song finishes, they're like, yes, thank you for saying that. And it's a testament to Shayna's beautiful writing too.
A lot of action in the crowd as we're watching this. Let's hear a clip from the show. We'll get an idea of the fire that Danyel is talking about. This is the song, The March We Demand Equality, performed by the ensemble cast. Let's hear it. I'm watching Danyel watch the promotional video there. You see that steely gaze that you have while you're singing. Of course, you can't tell that we're standing up because you're in it. Listening back to the lyrics, we demand to be heard, we demand to be known, we demand a voice, we demand to be heard, we demand to be seen, equality now. Listening back to those lyrics, would you tell me what that song means to you?
That we're not asking, we demand it. It's just a war cry. Really. And then in that song, we go through so many just the ebbs and flows again of, galvanizing, and then Ida refuses to be second. She refuses to be in the back, and you see her make this triumphant move, which was of course historical, but the way they staged it was so beautiful. She comes straight down right to the front, and by that time now she's leading the pack, and then they're attacked, and then they galvanize again. It's a really, really beautiful scene, which I imagine just is a morsel of what actually happened, with the violence that they encountered. They didn't ask; they demanded, even in the face of honestly evil, And this, I had no idea any of this happened until doing this show, and doing that march is just invigorating every day.
It's powerful, and it helps you understand a piece of that history.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the production, Rachel, and trying to put that together, what does it mean for the production, especially that first? That's really an anchor in the first act. I know there's a lot more to come after that song in the first act, but it really is sort of an anchor at that point.
Absolutely. It's the first big ensemble number where you get to see everyone performing together. And I feel like it's all leading up to the march from the beginning of the show. And Ida comes in and disrupts the action that Alice and her crew are working on. And then we get to see the march, and we see the way in which the Black women are integrated and or disrupting that demonstration.
Love that term, disruptor. President Woodrow Wilson is in Suffs. A big supporter of his at the time is Dudley Field Malone. Also in the play, they are not played by men. In fact, the whole cast identifies as either non-binary or female. What do you believe that cast adds to the musical and the intention behind doing that?
So this casting philosophy was really built by our director, Lee Silverman, Tony Award nominee, and Shayna, myself, my producing partner, Jill Furman. And we wanted the women of today and non-binary folks, non-cis men, to be able to reclaim and tell this story. And so while we have women and non-binary folks playing these characters, they are also opportunities for us to see the way in which men participated in this movement. On one end of the spectrum, you have someone like President Wilson, and on the other end of the spectrum, you have Dudley Field Malone, who ends up leaving Wilson's administration in support of suffrage. And so it's important that we also see that this movement was not just and can never just be women. It actually takes everyone. And so that is part of why Dudley Field Malone is so heavily featured in our show.
What's unique about Suffs, or even deliberately unique in y'all's presentation, that can help audiences understand what American women have gone through or go through now? Yeah.
I think that Suffs ultimately is a story about the hard-won, ongoing fight for not just specifically the vote, but our show does cover the vote, for equality, and how this is a cyclical fight. This idea that every generation helps to move the needle a little further so that the next generation can pick up the mantle and continue that fight. And Suffs really is an intergenerational story. On one end, you have this older guard led by Carrie Chapman Catt, and then you have on the other end the young radicals led by Alice Paul. And it is actually that tension which we see mirrored over and over again in our nation's history that that we bring to life. And that should be, in our view and in the show's view, a cause for hope and not for despair. That this is an ongoing fight. There will always be more work to do, and there will always be that next generation to help see it through.
It's beautiful when you think about it, and the way I've been trying to promote the show for a couple of weeks, and the way that I'm writing it and things like that, and I never thought about it in this regard. We're saying race, class, but as simple as young and old, rich and poor, black and white. This is kind of what we're seeing, this ongoing tension and this ongoing fight. Wait My Turn. Mm-hmm. It's your powerful Act 1 solo. People can YouTube it as well. That's what they're going to want to do after this, to hear you do your magic here. Are you someone in your personal life, Danyel, that's going to wait their turn?
No. I mean, if it's appropriate at the time, absolutely. But in the case of inequality, no. And in the places where I'm not that way, Ida is actually developing me to do so. I always talk about when I read a passage in her autobiography about a time she was at the Negro Fellowship League, and there were some gentlemen outside that were causing some havoc. And she sent one of the security guys, "Can you go and handle it?" And he came back in and said, "Oh, they're just too much." And she goes, "I'll do it." And she walked outside and had a conversation with them and did it out of love and said, "You can come inside, but you can't do this out here." And they said, "No, we can. We respect you too much." And after reading that, I said, "Oh, Ida, you're going to make a woman out of me, aren't you?" Because she just had the gumption and the strength and the resolution to say, "I know that I can handle this because I'm coming with an open heart to invite and also to correct." And she was that way throughout her life. So she never waited her turn. And I just hope to take that example far beyond Suffs, because she's just a shining example of truth and honesty and courage.
It's wonderful to notice and see that personal development and see kind of Ida come alive within you. When performing Wait My Turn, what lyrics in that song do you identify with most? Is there anything like you want to nail for the audience in particular?
There's the whole thing, but as we're speaking, one thing just popped up in my head. I'm so sick of rhetoric with no action to back it. There's so many things people say when we talk about a lot of liberal people. There's a notion that I value these things, but they're not put into action. When a lot of people are actually challenged in real time, they can't handle it. And I just hope and pray and challenge that when you are, moved or you feel uncomfortable, to work through it. Because if there's any time we need, and we say, "Oh, such a time as this." It's been a time as this for a very, very, very long time for a lot of people, for the entire nation. But I think we're waking up in a different way. And if we needed you, we need you now. So if you are, moved to feel anything, please put it into action. Please put boots on the ground in whatever way you can.
Rachel, in addition to race and gender, there's class dynamics within the movement. Earlier, we talked to Natalie Belanger from the Connecticut Museum of Culture and History, who said suffragists had multiple issues that they were trying to bring to the fore, really. And we see this throughout the play. In addition to the right to vote, obviously, is that part of the subtext for the play, too? Tell me about class in Suffs.
Oh, absolutely. We have Róża Węglowska, one of our Suffs, who is a Polish immigrant factory worker, who really comes in to the group of radicals and is there to say, "I'm not here to throw a tea party with all of you Suffs of a higher class than I am. I'm here, to make action and do something about it." And she has these moments throughout the show where she is able to touch on the fact that if it was an immigrant woman, if it was someone of a lower born class, would they be treated the same as some of these higher class white women who were able to do this? This is something we don't actually cover so much in the show, but these women did this as their livelihood, and not all women had that privilege to be able to just fight for suffrage and be an activist. They had to earn a living for their family. And so Róża really is representative of that. And I think it's also really important to what Danyel was saying. Suffrage and Alice Paul's perspective is this is a single issue fight for the vote.
Yes.
Many other women of class, race, in particular Black women, had other fights that they were fighting at the same time, not just for the right to vote because they were women. And so we really try and bring that tension into the conversation. We also have a character, Elva Belmont, who is a real historical figure as well, representing philanthropy in this higher class.
A lot of cash.
A lot of cash. And is able to, become the patron of the National Women's Party. And we see the way that she and Ruja interact together. And so I think it's a really interesting point that you bring up, because it is not just a story about gender. It is a story about race. It is a story about class. And while they didn't have the language at the time, what we today can see is this is an intersectional fight. And that is how we need to approach it in 2026 and beyond.
It's just kind of I'm reminded what you said about rhetoric earlier. This is probably the most powerful thing about Suffs is, while there are going to be forces like Alice Paul who want this to be single issue, you don't know how long single issue sort of causes can really permeate or make a difference. And we're seeing that in America now with a lot of people that want change. If you want change, you may be bedraggled by a party that says that, no, we should just focus on this one thing or whatever. And maybe some of the progress that we've made in recent years is something they're going to turn away from to change the country. So it's fascinating what happens when you sort of focus on one issue. And as Alice Paul does in the show, she is constantly sort of whacked in the face, either by Danyel or Ruja, as you said, or even at the end, well, let's not spoil it, but nonetheless, there's constant reminders there to Alice Paul's that there are more than the issue of just women's suffrage at play, or at least standing it up there. We have more coming after the break. We are not going to let you guys go yet. We have one more segment. You've been listening to Danyel Fulton and Rachel Sussman, powerful forces behind Suffs. It's playing at the Bushnell. They aren't going anywhere. After the break, we're going to examine some of the words, lyrics, and important imagery displayed in the musical. Give us a call, 888-720, if you'd like to talk about it, 888-720-9677. You're listening to The Wheelhouse on Connecticut Public.
In truth, it's not your call. Either I march with my own state delegates, or I don't march at all. I'm not here to soothe your guilt. That is none of my concern. I won't beg for your approval, which I shouldn't have to earn. So no matter what you tell me, I will not wait one more minute for my turn.
This is The Wheelhouse from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Frankie Graziano. The fight for the 19th Amendment comes alive in Suffs, the Tony Award-winning musical from Broadway that's also made its way into Hartford. This hour, we're talking to a cast member and a person from the show's creative staff about Shayna Taub's musical featuring some of America's most powerful women. Speaking of bringing people to life, Danyel Fulton brings Ida B. Wells to life in Suffs. Thank you for sticking with us here. Rachel Sussman is Suffs creative director. Thank you so much for giving us a peek into the show as well. We hope you'll join the conversation today about Suffs and the fight for women's rights. Give us a call or hit us up on our YouTube stream, 888-720-9677, the number to call. You said you really weren't initiated to Ida B. Wells, I guess, when you were younger, but now that you've gotten to know Ida and she's sort of maybe taking over, do you feel like she's back with us here?
Whoa, in many, many different ways. I don't mean to get spiritual foo-foo, but I definitely...
You do whatever you want.
I mean, I definitely believe that she's still permeating. And I see her examples in many people. I bring up someone like Tamika Mallory with Until Freedom, and someone who is not afraid to speak up, Amanda Seales. I see her image, her likeness in a lot of younger black women, and I pray to be my own version as well. But she's definitely around.
What did you have to do to become Ida? You said you read an autobiography. What else? What kind of things do you have to do to get all method on us?
Method. Well, exist. That's one thing I don't have to be too method about. Because
well, that's the thing. It's like being strong and having to do all that. It's one thing to say that these women are powerful, but you kind of need Ida to come alive a little bit, because it's a lot to ask you to go out there and do this in 2026.
But it's a worthy responsibility, and, all the women and non-binary people are on stage that way and leave the stage that way. As the black women like myself, Mary Church Terrell, played by Tricia Jeffrey, and Victoria Peckle, who plays Phyllis, and another one, we're not going to say who, surprise for later. We leave the stage as who we are. So as we go around our everyday lives, we're still black women that have to experience what that means every day. That's just, existing in that way and understanding that experience. But reading, it was a different experience for her, in the 1800s, I read her autobiography, Crusades for Justice. We were just talking about her great-granddaughter, Michelle Duster, who wrote Ida B. the Queen, just researching her life. And I like to hear if I'm playing a historical character, she's about the third one I believe I played, I like to hear what they say about themselves, and then also hear what their family says about them as well. Let's go inward first. And whatever, is in the show that's not necessarily written out in history, you make educated guesses on what they would do. It's important to me to show her humanity, because a lot of times activists get dehumanized. They become this one thing and unfortunately are seen as aggressive or, a trope of themselves. But I wanted to make sure that people, in any way I can, that she was a spiritual woman. She led Bible study. She prayed a lot. She was a mother of 4 children. She was a family woman, and I try to find spaces anywhere I can to show all of those colors of who she was.
Digging deeper into the songs and Ida B. Wells' recollections in the song, how many more lynchings must I cite? I said that earlier. You want me to put my sex before my race? How important is it for audiences to view racial inequality through Ida's eyes in 2026, I guess?
It's... What's the more dramatic word for important? It's
essential.
Essential. It's imperative.
It's everything.
It's everything. And unfortunately, the conversation has been, it is not only us. We talk about a one situation, one issue conversation. Black people, people of color, underprivileged people, women have been saying, if they come for us, they will come for everyone. And extremely unfortunately, we're seeing that. So it's imperative. It's for if I want to bring some people into the world, it's imperative for them. The state of the world. We've been leaders for a very, very long time, and I don't think that we are. I know that we aren't holding our end of the bargain. So in the small ways we can. Do active work inside of a musical if we can to, galvanize some people or just get them inspired. Hopefully we can, inspire the next generation to right the wrongs that we're doing right now. But it's extremely, extremely important.
Love the way that you put that. If they come for us, they can come for everyone. where are you during the plays, Rachel? I understand you're in Hartford for this one, so we get to have you back here. What's your involvement in the plays nowadays?
It's a great question. So, this musical, which I like to call my first baby, because I had a son in the midst of its premiere on Broadway. It was a 10-year journey to create this piece. It began in 2014. I shared this book, Jailed for Freedom, by Doris Stevens, one of our other characters in the musical, with Shayna Taub. And I said, this is something that has been percolating in me. I really feel like this story should be told. And Shayna had, as so many have experienced, know Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, and maybe you've heard the name Ida B. Wells, but otherwise, most of these women have been lost to history, and we were both so excited and honored to bring them to life in the national imagination. And Shayna, along with our director, Lee, and my producing partner, Jill, our music supervisor, Andrea, our choreographer, Maite Natalia. It's a team primarily made up of women and the creative leadership as well. We worked to bring this show over that decade of time through development. We premiered it at the Public Theater in New York, and then went to Broadway, where, as you mentioned, we won a few Tony Awards. And and so my job as a producer, which is such a nebulous word for folks, is really
Ain't it? I'm a producer too. I know what it is.
I'm sort of behind the scenes, running the strategy and positioning the show as we prepare to hit all of these various markets. And I do, as I was saying to Danielle, love to see how different audiences react. And it's been very affirming to see in this moment in 2026 how audiences are feeling galvanized around the show and leaving with this sort of call to action of our finale, which is keep marching. So I do check out the show on the road from time to time and get to come out to Hartford.
Welcome.
Thank you. But I primarily am based in New York, and I have a play that's running on Broadway right now, too.
I was going to say, so you're going to be somebody we're going to want to come back on the show often, because there's a theme where at least there's some political ties to your work. This is not the first. Suffs isn't the first sort of political angle that you followed. And I know people don't want to tie politics to women's suffrage, and that's a big reason why women stayed out of, some women stayed out of the fight for the vote, because it was sort of beneath some of the women to kind of get sullied up in politics. But politics is something you care about. How much can you talk about that work that you're doing, and why is politics something that you're trying to bring to the stage?
So I feel very moved to tell socially conscious stories that are going to resonate with audiences in this current moment. And so I do have a play on Broadway that's running through Sunday, Liberation by Bess Wall, directed by Whitney White, which of all things, I have spoken to both Shayna and Bess, and it feels like a companion piece to Suffs. It takes place in the 70s. And I won't spoil Suffs, but there are some tie-ins to the second wave of the feminist movement. And I'm particularly interested in...
By that time, Alice Paul's old hat, essentially, I think is what we're kind of getting to.
The old guard.
The old guard.
The old fogey.
She's
That's
the Carrie
right.
Chapman cat.
Exactly. And, I want to be able to be, I call it like a creative doula, to help bring work, shepherd work, and offer a platform for these stories that are possibly messy and are asking hard questions and forcing the audience to lean in and challenging them to think about their lives and their place in the world in a different way. And I do that in all sorts of ways, but Suffs was really the my center of gravity for such a long time, and I feel really honored that now I can develop other things based off of my experience here.
I value and appreciate your work and the way that you talk about it, because the creativity aspect is something that people don't think about producers a lot, because nowadays every Hollywood star is a producer now. And basically a lot of times people think of producers as connections and making just talent connections, but the work that you're doing and bringing this to the people in a creative aspect is like, it's not just like, who should we have play this, but how should people play this? So there's a little bit of direction in there too. So I really value that. Digging back into Suffs, here are some more imagery I caught on to during the show. There's the sacred sphere of nurturing, Rachel. There's the silent chorus of centuries. Let Mother Vote is a song you could hear as sort of a gentle plea to a man for his support for a cause. And then there's the youngster at the end of the play that meets an older Alice. Paul, we talked about that, evoking memories within Alice of her relationship with Carrie Chapman Catt. You also hear about Ida B. Wells' relationship with Carrie Chapman Catt and her having to have that conversation. What do we make of these examples I'm pointing to? Is either ways women are perceived by others, or even what they have to endure to have rights or to exist, as you said earlier?
Absolutely. I mean, the show opens on Let Mother Vote, and you see the National American Women's Suffrage Association, which Carrie runs, sort of very politely asking men to let Mother Vote. And she's working sort of on a state-by-state level, trying to gain these allies with male politicians. And Alice Paul comes in and says, this is going to take forever. We've already been doing this for 60 years. Let's fight for a federal amendment. Why would we do this in this way? And so you see these two different strategies actually fighting for the same thing, which is ultimately getting women the vote, but in two completely different ways, and the ways in which they rub up against each other, and also the ways in which they ultimately need each other. And that is shown, you see that sort of tension bubble up and build between Alice and Carrie throughout the show. But yeah, there were two different approaches. This sort of federal amendment now, we're going to take action, versus we are going to take a much more conciliatory approach and build these relationships and allyships. Action's
a good word, because there's messaging within Finish the Fight and We Demand Equality and Keep Marching. These are calls to actions. Should audiences heed these calls? Why might they need to? Is this something that, as you all are writing this and putting this together, you're like, yeah, we kind of want them to act and do something? Are you trying to really galvanize folks, I guess?
I think that is very much Shayna's intention, especially by the time you go on this journey and you emotionally connect with Alice and Ida and Carrie. I think one of the brilliant things Shayna has done is, while Carrie is an antagonist to Alice Paul as the protagonist, she is not a villain in any way. And I think it's really important to recognize that these were complex humans. And Alice Paul also makes politically justified decisions, in her view, over racial justice ones, in asking Ida and other Black women to march in the back of their 1913 march. So it is a really interesting thing. And Finish the Fight is, I think, an ongoing call to folks.
I could speak to you all day. We got to wind down here, unfortunately. So this is the last question. I'm speaking to you before the show, Danyel, in Hartford, before it's performed in front of live audiences at the Bushnell in Hartford. What do you want local audiences to take away from the show when they see you?
I was listening to what you were saying, the overall message, and I feel like one line in Ida's Wait My Turn is, you do have a choice. There's always a choice. Which one will you make? And if we do anything on top of galvanize and inspire, I want people to be aware of their choices, that every day there is one, to know that they exist, and that they affect people one-on-one. Like, the choices that many leaders make inform my everyday, as a Black person in America. So I want people to open their eyes to that. Of course, I want them to know more and more about Ida. I want them to get inspired and go on suffmusical.com and see the timeline and all the literature that they can read to get more information about them. I want them to be inspired and to learn more.
When you see this play, if you see it in Hartford, you see it wherever. I think it's going to Cleveland at some point. There's a national tour. It's a big national tour. You will not be able to mistake Danyel Fulton. Just a fantastic performance. Thank you for coming on the Wheelhouse today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for bringing Ida back to us here in America, and Nikki James as well.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Rachel Sussman, thank you, Rachel Sussman. Now I'm going to start calling you Sussman. Do people do that?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
You're not the first.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your work in putting this out to the audiences.
Thank you so much for having us.
This is the Wheelhouse. Thank you so much for listening today. Today's show was produced by Talia Ricketson, edited by Patrick Scahill. Our technical director is Dylan Reyes. That's it for this week's show. Tune in next week. This is the Wheelhouse.